Hello class, so now I'm doing a screencast of how it is that we're understanding the work toward the final essay, basically the second installment, which is the last writing that we're going to do for this semester. So this is basically the final essay. I used to have this divided up where the work that you've done as far as the arguments I consider it a draft. But nowadays, I'm more of the mind to make this as easy as possible for you now that you've done all the work of the arguments already. So that's more or less the spirit here. And then likewise, also, I'm wanting to emphasize this point on place-based ethics. So in other words, I'm a strong believer in place-based ethics in terms of understanding that we need to see our environmental impact by way of our personal experience and how that ties in by way of emotion as well. Because the way that we're connected to our environmental issue is emotional, okay? And so place-based ethics emphasizes what's already there, okay? So in other words, yes, we're working toward an understanding that we are living in an environment, but we're also recognizing that we are already there to begin with. So in the sense, that's the philosophical way in which we're approaching this, that in other words, we already have what it takes to understand our moral conscientiousness in the world as it's practiced. So because we do it already. So now what we're doing is we're giving word to that by way of a formal ethical theory. So this is going to be due July 24th, which is the last day of class at 11:30 p.m. via the assignments folder. No late work accepted. Please do not ask. And the word count is going to be 500 words minimum. Okay, so basically you could think of this as two short 250 word essays, okay? So this is as simple as possible, and the reason why is because I want you to focus on these two elements. So first part is the environmental and experiential account. So in 250 words, offer an experiential account of your ethical issue in terms of your personally lived experience in relation to the ethical theory selected in your favored environmental arguments. So how it is that you argued for your position in the paper that you wrote already. How is that understood by way of experience for you personally? Okay, so I want to know how that's actually working. So like an example for me would be couple of semesters ago, I had a similar assignment, and this is when we were doing face-to-face classes, and I was working through how it is that I was wanting to have a sense of virtue around my paper consumption. So in other words, as a professor, I had to personally be aware of how it is that I'm using paper in order to help students understand ideas in the classroom. And so I still saw that I needed to have paper to a certain degree, and I was trying to draw a golden mean by way of understanding that there's only there's a golden mean of paper that I could use. So in other words, an excess would be just using way too much paper, but then not having any paper was just not a possibility. So in other words, doing completely without paper didn't seem to be a possibility until now. That, in other words, now that we're in a pandemic and we're teaching all the classes online, remotely, the paper consumption is down to 0. So, in other words, I at one point thought that it was impossible to do without the paper. Now I figured out that by way of my personal experience due to the COVID pandemic, I have been able to reach my goal, my virtuous goal of not using paper. So then in terms of the emotional account here, this is also likewise very simple. So in 250 words, offer an emotional account of your ethical issue in terms of your personally lived experience in relation to the ethical theory selected in your favored environmental arguments. So here I want you to be very specific in terms of an emotion that you could identify by way of your personally lived experience, by way of your problematic environmental issue as well, right? So, in other words, take for example my relation to paper consumption. This could also be a frustration that's actually met with great happiness, because now I'm realizing that I can do without paper quite effectively and still teach a class. So, in other words, I'm very pleased emotionally with the outcome of the my paper use, as it's been reduced due to the restrictions of COVID. So there's a little bit of a silver lining there in terms of the pandemic, but we don't want to get crazy with making that connection. So that's how we're seeing it, okay? And so what I'm really trying to emphasize for students here is I want students to see how it is that they're understanding the environment personally and how it is that they're understanding it emotionally in terms of lived experience, because we are not separate from these issues. And so the minute we start seeing ourselves as separate from our environment, therein lies the problems. That, I believe, is a lot of the reason why we have so many problems understanding nature and our place in it, and also how it is that we understand ourselves as well as a part of nature, as taking part in nature, okay? So here, just have a closing. Thank you for the hard work over the summer. Absolutely. You guys have been awesome students, and it's always been a pleasure grading all of your work. Amazing work overall. So we got good with our moral theories, enough to see ourselves as part of the greater whole, conscientiously, environmentally, emotionally, and always something more. So thanks, class, and talk to you later.